Welcome back to Autodesk Maya. This is a continuation of the Hero Project Part 10. In this tutorial we're going to basically cover rendering and setting up our light. So basically in the last tutorial we finished our model here of this hero shield, and what I have done is I've essentially grouped it. So you can see here the different groups including the star and the shield. And if we shift select all of these just by clicking on the bottom one and then shift selecting the top, I would then hit Control G or Command G to create a group, and then I just named it Hero Shield. So if we were going to animate this, we'd probably want to have a control curve around the outside edge, but we're not going to be animating this, so this is fine. So to select the group, all you got to do is click on one part of the shield and then hit the up arrow, and then you'll notice that the Hero Shield here has been selected. So what we want to do is basically render this with some sort of bottom, because right now it's transparent to below, there's no plane. So I'm going to add a plane here. I can click on my little custom plane here, or I can go to the create menu if you're following along, choose polygon primitives, and then choose plane. I'm going to immediately hit the R key and then grab the center cube here and just scale it up quite a bit so that it basically fills the scene here. Now I can then go to the Hypershed menu, and I have a hotkey set up. You've seen previous tutorials how to find that. That's again under the window settings here. Under window, and then you can go to render endings and then choose Hypershade. But here this would be the defaults for the Lambert shader, which I can double click on to access it. You can also do that just by clicking on the plane and then moving over to the Lambert shader here. And essentially what I've done in between is I've kind of cranked this up a little bit so it's just a little bit brighter. So it's not quite so gray looking. Now if we render this, what we want to do is go ahead and minimize that. I'm going to click on the render settings, which is this little chain gear widget on these four clappers. It's the fourth one here. And by default, you may have whatever one selected here. I'm going to choose the Maya software and basically just click on the second clapper, and you can see what happens here when I render this. You'll look at it and you're like, whoa, that looks pretty awful. And it does. So Maya by itself, the Maya software is not very good. There's some other ones in here. There's a Maya hardware. If we choose to render that, it's not going to be much better. It will smooth out the circle, make it a little better, but the lighting doesn't look very natural typically. Maya hardware 2.0, we could try that one and repeat the same action, and we get somewhat of a little bit better results, but ultimately the one we're going to want to choose is the Arnold renderer. Here's Maya Vector. If we click on that, you can kind of see what kind of results you get. You basically get that faceted result again. Basically flattens out into a vector sort of structure. The Arnold renderer, by the way, if you don't see Arnold renderer, you can go to Windows and go to Settings and Preferences and go to Plugin Manager. And then the Plugin Manager, if you scroll down towards the bottom, there's this Maya 2a.ml, which is the Maya 2 Arnold renderer. Make sure these both are checked. And then there you go. And so now that we have the Arnold renderer, let's go ahead and click the render and let's see what happens. So as it's rendering here, something might happen. I'm going to pause in between while so basically we have black. And you might be asking yourself, what's going on here? Why is it all dark? The reason why is because we have no lights in our scene yet. So let's go ahead and create a light. I'm going to click on the create menu, choose lights, and choose basically a directional light here. And then I'm going to hit W, and that will immediately grab my move tool and be able to move it in place here. So here it is as a light, and you can scale it up or down just by hitting the R key if you want to scale up the menu. The directional light basically is an infinite light. So it doesn't matter where you position it, it's a matter about its rotation, its angle. So if we hit number, again, those hotkeys, 4 is wireframe, 5 shaded solid, 6 is textured, and 7 is the actual lighting. And then if we hit E and then rotate, you'll kind of see a preview of what that light will be in. And typically you'll get some indication of what that light might look like. Now I'm just going to go ahead and render this. Click on that second clapper again and see how it looks. I'm going to pause while it renders. So here it is. It's not looking that great, but it is definitely an improvement. What I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to save my settings by clicking on this little save icon here, and I will minimize this so we can compare and adjust some things. First thing I want to adjust is the light itself. So you want to have your attribute editor open. Again, click on the attribute editor, which is this little icon here. And in the directional light, we're going to scroll down to the shadows area. And what we want to do is open up this section that says Ray Trace Shadows. And we want to crank these up a little bit. So I'm going to put in a value of 10, 10, and 10 there. And that will help a little bit. Now, if we do render right now, there might not be much of a difference. Let's go ahead and pause and see. So in fact, there is no difference whatsoever. So I'm going to go ahead and again save this out. And the reason why is because down here there's another section that's called Arnold. So the Arnold render is actually named after Arnold Schwarzenegger, and it was a company that was bought out by Autodesk, and they basically have been applying it to the different applications. So if we open up the Arnold render in the lights, what we want to do is click on this section that says Use Color Temperature. Check that little box, and then it'll cool down things. We could warm it up or change that by the value here. So if you want, you can adjust that and pick a different value. I'm going to leave it the default though, the 6600 here. And what I want to share with you is the difference in terms of the render and see what happens here. So again, I'm going to click on that clapper and I'll pause. So we're definitely getting something now. If I swap here, you'll see how it's cooled down, but not much else has happened in terms of the shadows or the lighting. So let's see about these other features. So we have exposure here, this value. Let's crank this up to 2 and see what would happen once we do that. So I'm going to hit the save button here, click on this little guy, and then click on the render guy, and again I'll pause while it renders. So much better render. We got a light brighter scene here. We got kind of a cool sort of glowing speck color there, which is looking good. The shadows are not that great though, so we can work on the shadows a little bit here. So let's see what we can do there. So we've got angle, and then we have samples here. So let's adjust the angle first. We'll bump that up to say 7 and then click out, and we'll see what happens here. Again, I'm going to save this for comparison and then click on the little render tab here, and again I'll pause. So I don't know if you can see it, but if we zoom in here, you can see how the shadow is starting to break up a little bit, and that is due to the angle here. But what we need essentially is more samples of the light going back and forth. So if I move this down here and highlight this, I'm going to type in a value of 5 here, and then we're going to again save this for comparison, click on this little icon, and then click the render tab here, and I will pause while it renders. So what you can see here now has the render time has increased each time we've adjusted some variables. And if I zoom in here on the shadow area and I will move back one, you can see how there's a little bit more softer shadow now. Now I may want to angle this a little bit different, and in fact if we go to our render settings and open that up again, and let's see here. So here we have the render settings, and what we want to do is adjust some of the settings here. So the Arnold render, I've upped these to 3 for the samples here, which is good. But maybe in here, instead of HD 540, we're going to bump it up to HD 720. And then also for the system, I bumped this up to 3. So that kind of gave it a better value. The other thing I want to do is actually angle the light maybe a little bit different. So you get a little bit more shadow in here. The other thing we want to do is frame in on it a little better. So I'm going to click on this little preview of the actual render size, so I can zoom in a little bit and get a better clue for this. Now I could also add a secondary light, which might be kind of cool. The other thing we might try and look at is in the light settings here, the material is what we want to adjust for the reflection. Let me look at this render here for a sec. So the star, for example, doesn't have a great deal of reflection. Click on the star there. It has this blend material here. Let's add, because the whole render process works with your materials, your lighting, and everything else combined together. So the specular is up quite a bit, which is good. Maybe increase the reflectivity a little bit. Let's see. Let's try this one. Let's check out these different colors. So the blue is kind of calm, doesn't have a lot of specular going on here. So we could definitely increase that a little bit. The brightness here, specular roll off. So we can kind of play around with that finesse a little bit. And then perhaps the red material too, we can adjust and just add a little bit more pizzazz in terms of the reflectivity and some of the other attributes that are going on there. All right, so now let's go ahead and render this and let's see how this looks. I'll pause while this is rendering. Alright, so I did a couple renders in between, and I discovered something that I was thinking a lot about was I liked the brightness, I liked the dark shadows, but I noticed saturation was not happening. It got away from me, and that was due to the spec. You can see here in the red, so if we go back to the red materials, this is where materials and lighting has a lot to do with it. You can see the blue material here, how that white sort of blows out the material, where here you got nice red, and that's controlled a lot by the eccentricity here. So if I reduce this value here, you get more of that color to shine through. The amount of that, you could increase the amount by having a little bit more roll off, and then of course you can have a little more reflectivity adjust through there. So what I'll do is I'll do one more render with this, and possibly adjust the lighting on these two just a little bit, and then I'll do another render where I flip it over and then show you those here in a sec. But you can see what a tremendous difference it makes from this render to here. So again, the three things you got to adjust is the lights, the materials, and of course some of the render settings. I'm going to pause here real quick while I do those last two renders. Alright, so you can see here some final renders. I did that one and then that one. I increased the intensity of the red and the blue for sure. I kind of felt like that looked a lot better, and you can see how far we've come from the very beginning here. So rendering does take a long process, but once you get the render set up the way you want, then if you want to animate, you can keep those same settings. You don't have to mess with it anymore. I think especially the inside here looks really well. It's got some nice shadows on both sides there. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on the final render for the prop project. The next tutorial will actually discover how to actually create a prop product using some of these renders. Until next time, cheers.